The gallery unveiling. The evening air shimmered with elegance as Marcus adjusted his charcoal tie, watching guests arrive at the contemporary art gallery. Isabella stood across the room in a stunning emerald dress, her dark hair cascading down her back like silk. She was laughing with collectors and critics, the center of attention as always. Marcus felt the familiar ache, that quiet distance that had settled between them over the past 3 years, unspoken but undeniable. Isabella had poured herself into curating this exhibition, and Marcus had supported her completely, reviewing every detail, offering suggestions she rarely acknowledged. Yet here he stood, a shadow in his own marriage, watching the woman he loved become a stranger in a crowded room. As the evening reached its peak, Isabella raised her crystal glass, her smile radiant and confident. "I want to thank everyone for coming," she announced, her voice carrying across the gallery. "But most of all, I need to thank my husband Marcus, who has been." She paused, her eyes twinkling with what she believed was playful affection. "Who has been? Well, let's just say I think I need a better one." Laughter erupted around them, but Marcus felt something inside him crack. The joke landed harder than she intended, touching the raw nerve of his own insecurity. He watched her face, saw the pleasure she took in the crowd's reaction, and something shifted within him. Marcus set down his champagne and met her eyes across the room. When she glanced at him, still riding the wave of laughter, he stood. The crowd gradually quieted, sensing the shift in energy. He walked toward her slowly, deliberately, his expression calm but carrying the weight of months of silence. He reached her side and gently took the microphone from her hand. His voice, when he spoke, was steady and clear, carrying an honesty that seemed to freeze the room. "Isabella, you're right," he began, and he saw her expression shift to confusion. "But maybe it's not a better husband you need. Maybe it's seeing the husband who has been here all along, the one who loves every version of you, the fierce curator, the ambitious woman, even the one who doesn't always see how deeply she's loved." The silence was absolute. Isabella's face flushed, a mixture of embarrassment and something deeper washing over her features. Around them, guests exchanged uncomfortable glances, the warmth of her joke suddenly feeling hollow. Marcus held the microphone for a moment longer, his eyes locked with hers, then he turned and walked back into the crowd, leaving her standing alone in the spotlight she had created. The drive home was silent, the city lights blurring past the car windows. Isabella sat in the passenger seat, her arms crossed, her mind spinning between anger and an unfamiliar shame. Marcus kept his focus on the road, his jaw set but his hands calm on the steering wheel. They arrived at their modern penthouse apartment without exchanging words. Isabella went directly to their bedroom and changed out of the emerald dress, removing the carefully applied makeup she had spent an hour perfecting. When she emerged in comfortable clothes, Marcus was on the balcony overlooking the city, a glass of whiskey untouched beside him. "That was unfair," she said quietly, stepping beside him. "You humiliated me." "I didn't intend to humiliate you," Marcus replied, his voice carrying no anger, only sadness. "I intended to be honest. There's a difference." Isabella felt tears prick her eyes but refused to let them fall. "You could have talked to me privately instead of making a scene." "I've tried talking to you privately," Marcus said, finally turning to face her. "For months. But you're always too tired, too focused on the gallery, too wrapped up in your own world. So when you publicly diminished me, I needed you to hear what I was saying. Truly hear it." She wanted to defend herself, to argue, but something in his face stopped her. Instead, she retreated to the living room, curling up on the sofa with her laptop, scrolling through emails about the exhibition without really seeing them. The next morning, Marcus was already awake when Isabella came to the kitchen. He had made coffee, the way she liked it, oat milk with 1 sugar. He placed a worn leather sketchbook on the counter beside her. "What's this?" she asked, though something in her chest already knew. "Look through it," he said simply, then left for his home office. With trembling hands, Isabella opened the sketchbook. On every page was her sketches of her sleeping, her laughing, her concentrating. There was a drawing of her from their wedding day, another of her at the gallery last week, one of her looking out the window at dawn. The detail was extraordinary. He had captured not just her features but her essence, the light in her eyes, the curve of her smile. Some drawings were simple and quick, others rendered in careful detail with shading and depth. On the last page, written in his careful handwriting, were the words, "The woman I fall in love with every single day, even when she doesn't know I'm watching. Especially then." Isabella sank onto the kitchen stool, the sketchbook clutched to her chest. How many hours had he spent on this? How much love had he poured into each line? She thought back to the times she had been too busy to notice him sketching, too preoccupied with her own ambitions to ask what he was creating. She realized, with a sharp pain in her chest, that she had been so focused on building her career that she had neglected the man who had quietly built this portrait of their life together with his art. She found him in his office, staring at his computer screen without really looking at it. "Marcus," she whispered, and when he turned to her, she saw the vulnerability in his eyes, the part of him she had stopped seeing long ago. "I didn't know," she said, holding up the sketchbook. "I know," he replied softly. "That's what hurts the most." The garden confession. The following weekend, Marcus suggested they visit their country house, the small cottage with the sprawling garden that they had purchased 5 years ago with dreams of creating a sanctuary together. Isabella agreed, sensing this was important, though she couldn't quite articulate why. The garden was in full spring bloom, roses and jasmine climbing the stone walls, the air thick with the scent of growth and renewal. They walked in silence initially, Isabella still processing the weight of the sketchbook, still grappling with her own guilt and the realization that she had become someone her husband had to reach across a crowded room to truly connect with. They sat on the wrought iron bench near the fountain, the city visible in the distance below them like a glowing map of their ordinary life. "Why do you stay?" Isabella asked suddenly. "If I'm so difficult, so dismissive, why haven't you just given up?" Marcus took a moment before answering, choosing his words carefully. "Because love isn't something you give up on when it gets hard. It's what you return to when everything else feels uncertain. You are my uncertain. My beautiful, infuriating, brilliant uncertain." He reached over and took her hand, and Isabella felt the warmth of his touch like an anchor. "I see you, Isabella," he continued. "I see the woman who works until midnight perfecting details that almost no one will notice. I see the woman who cries in the shower when she thinks no one is listening, because you're afraid you're not good enough. I see the woman beneath the curator, beneath the ambition, the woman who once told me she was terrified of being ordinary. And I'm telling you now, you could never be ordinary. Not to me." Tears streamed down Isabella's face as she heard the years of unspoken devotion in his voice. She realized that while she had been climbing, building, achieving, Marcus had been standing beside her, documenting her journey with his art, his presence, his steady, unwavering love. "I've been so blind," she whispered. "So cruel without meaning to be." "No," Marcus said, wiping her tears with his thumb. "You've just been human. We both have." He stood and pulled her up gently, drawing her close. Isabella looked up at him and saw him, truly saw him, for the first time in so long. Not the husband who was supposed to support her ambitions, not the background figure in her carefully curated life, but the man who loved her with the kind of quiet devotion that didn't demand recognition, only acknowledgement. When he kissed her, it felt like coming home after a long journey. His lips were soft but insistent, carrying months of longing, and Isabella responded with equal intensity, her hands threading through his dark hair. The kiss deepened, years of distance dissolving in the garden where roses bloomed around them like witnesses to their rediscovery. They broke apart breathlessly, and Marcus rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said, and Isabella heard in those 4 words everything he had tried to tell her through his sketches, his presence, his constant, gentle devotion. "I love you too," she breathed. "I'm going to do better. I'm going to see you better." Back in the penthouse, everything had changed, yet nothing had visibly transformed. The furniture was the same, the art on the walls unchanged, but between Marcus and Isabella, the air crackled with a new electricity. That night, Isabella initiated intimacy for the first time in months. She pulled Marcus toward their bedroom with a confidence that took him by surprise, pushing him gently onto the bed. She undressed slowly, deliberately, watching his eyes darken as she revealed herself to him. There was no rush, no mechanical routine. Instead, there was intention, presence, the feeling of being truly seen. "I want to know all of you again," she whispered, straddling him. Her hands traced the familiar landscape of his chest, but with renewed attention, discovering places she had forgotten or never truly known. She kissed him slowly, deliberately, starting at his neck and moving downward, feeling him respond beneath her touch. Marcus's hands moved across her skin with reverence, touching her as if she were made of something precious and fragile. "Isabella," he murmured against her hair, "you're so beautiful." She moved above him, and they found a rhythm that was both familiar and entirely new, built on weeks of emotional reconnect rather than habit. When they reached their climax together, it was accompanied by whispered affirmations, quiet cries of pleasure and relief, the sound of two people finding their way back to each other. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Isabella's head on Marcus's chest, his fingers trailing gently along her shoulder. This was when the real conversation began. "I've been so afraid," Isabella admitted quietly. "Afraid that if I wasn't constantly achieving, constantly climbing, I would disappear. That you would see me without the success and not want me anymore." Marcus tilted her chin up to look at him. "I fell in love with you at a coffee shop when you were waitressing and studying architecture at night. You were working on sketches with a pen between your teeth, and you were just yourself. No achievements, no titles. Just you. That's who I love." "I didn't know you were watching me," Isabella said softly. "I was always watching," he replied. "Even when you weren't looking. And I loved what I saw." Over the following weeks, they found their rhythm again. Mornings started with slow, sensual touches as they woke together. Evenings were spent talking, really talking, about their fears, their dreams, the places where they had hurt each other, the ways they could heal. Isabella began leaving the gallery earlier, creating space for their life together. Marcus shared his architectural aspirations, dreams he had shelved years ago to support her career, and Isabella helped him dust them off. One evening, Isabella sat at the kitchen counter watching Marcus cook dinner, his movements confident and graceful. She marveled at how she had taken this man for granted, how the simple act of watching him work could now fill her with tenderness and appreciation. "What are you thinking?" he asked, sensing her gaze. "That I'm very lucky," she said simply. He came around the counter and kissed the top of her head. "We both are." The turning point. 3 weeks after their moment in the garden, Isabella organized a small dinner party, not a grand event, but an intimate gathering of close friends. It was Marcus's birthday, and she had carefully orchestrated the evening to be about him, a public declaration of her love and admiration. The evening began with appetizers and quiet conversation, but when they sat down to dinner, Isabella stood, her eyes finding Marcus across the table. The room fell silent, remembering the last time she had stood to speak at a gathering. "I want to tell you all something," she began, her voice steady and clear. "3 weeks ago, I made a joke at an event, a joke that was meant to be playful but was really just careless. It revealed something I hadn't wanted to see about myself, that I had stopped truly appreciating the man beside me. But Marcus, with more grace than I deserved, showed me the error of my ways." She paused, gathering her emotions. "This man," she continued, gesturing to Marcus, "has spent years supporting my dreams, documenting my journey, loving me with a consistency and gentleness that I failed to recognize. He is not just a better husband than I was giving him credit for. He is my greatest teacher, my truest mirror, my partner in the deepest sense of the word. I want to spend the rest of my life doing for him what he has always done for me, seeing him, valuing him, choosing him every single day." Marcus's eyes were wet with unshed tears as she smiled at him. "Happy birthday, my love," Isabella finished softly. That night, after the guests had left, Marcus pulled Isabella onto the balcony overlooking the city. The night was cool and clear, stars visible despite the urban glow. "That was beautiful," he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "It was true," she replied, leaning back into his embrace. They stood together in the darkness, and Marcus reached into his pocket. Isabella felt him shift, and when she turned, she saw him down on one knee, though they were already married. "I know we've already done this," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "but I wanted to ask you again, now that you see me. Isabella Grant, will you marry me all over again? Will you build a new chapter with me, where we both show up completely?" Instead of words, Isabella pulled him up and kissed him deeply, pouring every ounce of her renewed love into the connection. When they pulled apart, She whispered yes against his lips, again and again, like a prayer, like a promise. Later, as they made love in their bed, it was with the intensity of newlyweds, yet the comfort of long-time partners. Isabella moved above Marcus, her hands braced on his chest, her eyes locked with his as they moved together. She watched his face as pleasure washed over his features, watched him watch her in return, and understood that this was what true intimacy was, the willingness to be completely seen while offering the same vulnerability in return. "I see you," she whispered, moving faster, feeling him respond. "I see you too," Marcus replied, his hands gripping her waist. "God, Isabella, I've always seen you." When they climaxed together, it was with synchronized timing, their bodies in perfect harmony, their breathing intertwined. Afterward, they lay facing each other, Marcus's hand resting on her heart. "What changed?" he asked softly. "I did," Isabella answered. "Or maybe I just remembered who I was before I forgot to see you." Marcus smiled and drew her close, and in the darkness of their bedroom, two hearts beat in synchronous rhythm, having found their way back to each other through honesty, vulnerability, and the transformative power of truly being seen. The distance that had stretched between them was bridged, not by grand gestures, but by the simple, revolutionary act of paying attention, of choosing each other, again and again, day after day. As dawn broke over the city, Marcus and Isabella remained intertwined, their love story entering a new chapter, one written not in the spotlight of a crowded gallery, but in the quiet, sacred space they had created together.